Welcome back, story lovers. Last time we ended on a devastating performance. Aisha walked out of the Lee mansion, leaving Junho trapped in a golden cage, his heart and his vow to his unborn son locked in his study. The fire of their passion had broken the contract, but the cruel power of the Lee dynasty remained. But if you think Aisha Dio is the kind of woman to retreat into the shadows of defeat, you haven't understood her fire. She did not return to her country. She moved into the deep, churning heart of Seoul, ready to fight for the future her husband promised. Aisha Dio stepped out of the high-walled compound and into the cold autumn air, a mask of polite resignation fixed to her face. She endured Yunhee's triumphant glance and Madame Park's dismissive surgical sneer. Every agonizing step away from the car, away from the weeping Jiun, was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Her heart was a lead weight, but her mind was a steel trap. She did not head to Incheon Airport. Instead, the driver Junho had discreetly arranged dropped her off in a bustling, working-class district of Seoul, a place where no one would look for the former contract wife of a billionaire CEO. She settled into a small, nondescript apartment, the kind rented by students or independent professionals, perfectly suited to a woman seeking invisibility. The rent was paid in cash, the lease signed under a pseudonym. Inside, the space was warm and functional, but it was not a refuge. It was a command center. Aisha set up the encrypted burner phone Junho had given her, the only physical link to the man she loved and the child she had just left. She plugged in her laptop, already loading the complex legal databases and corporate registries Junho needed her to analyze. The pain of leaving Jiun was a constant, raw ache, but Aisha channeled it. Her sorrow was the fuel for her focus. She had watched Junho sacrifice his soul to play a role. She would not let that sacrifice be wasted on her passive retreat. Lee Junho returned to a life utterly drained of color. The silence of the mansion was once again suffocating, punctuated only by the crisp, formal movements of the staff. Yunhee, now resident in the mansion, played the role of the devoted mother and contrite wife-in-waiting, a calculating performance that grated on Junho's nerves. Jiun, however, was his greatest torment. The little girl was silent, withdrawn, and refused to look at Yunhee, clinging instead to a faded plush toy that Aisha had given her. Junho's attempts to comfort her were met with tearful resistance. Aisha, Auntie Aisha will always love you. Aisha's final words to Jiun echoed in his mind. He was trapped in the middle of a war, and his child was the first casualty. His custom-tailored suit felt less like armor and more like a uniform in a prison he had built for himself. His nights were spent in the solitude of his study. He pored over financial reports and asset portfolios, not for corporate gain, but for strategic defense. He began the methodical, glacial process of shifting funds into untraceable and protected trusts, ensuring that when he finally broke free, Aisha and his children would be financially ironclad, safe from the Lee dynasty's inevitable corporate retribution. The first encrypted text from Aisha arrived late one night. Junho snatched the burner phone from his desk drawer. They have initiated the PR narrative. You are the victim of a manipulative foreign opportunist. Play the chastened husband. It buys us time. Junho, Jiun is struggling. I need to see you. Just a glance. Risk. Calculated risk only. Our separation is our shield. They are watching your every move. Focus on the quarterly reports. They are vulnerable there. He immediately opened the reports. Aisha wasn't asking for updates. She was giving him a directive. She was looking for weaknesses in his own corporate structure that the chairman could exploit once the divorce hit the media. She was his outside counsel, his strategist, his partner. I'm moving the funds as discussed. Do not drain liquid capital. Leave enough to suggest normalcy. The chairman smells panic. Use the offshore shell we discussed. Target the IP valuation. Targeting the IP. Aisha, analyzing the Lee Corporation's legal documents from her small apartment, realized that the chairman's pride lay in a recent unpatented technology transfer, an intellectual property (IP) deal that, if publicly compromised or questioned, could significantly damage the company's valuation right before a crucial merger. The IP agreement has a weak foreign clause. If we use it as leverage, it hits his legacy. It is the knife at his throat, not just his wallet, honor and lineage. One evening, 3 weeks into their enforced separation, Junho received a panicked call from Madame Park. "Junho, that woman, she has started spreading lies about your father's health to the minor shareholders. It's ridiculous, but the stock is dipping." Junho knew instantly it wasn't Aisha, but Yoonhee, desperate to assert her power and sabotage the corporate stability. He ended the call, his jaw clenched, and immediately messaged Aisha. "Yoonhee is active, spreading corporate rumors. She's trying to prove her value to Mother. Exploit it. Do not stop her. Let her overplay her hand. I am researching the court's view on maternal emotional stability and corporate recklessness. If she damages the stock, it damages her standing as a stable mother and future corporate wife." Aisha wasn't just defending their future, she was actively building a case against his family, using their own ruthlessness against them. His panic turned to profound awe. This was not the woman who walked away. This was the woman who had only stepped back to get a better vantage point for the fight. He looked at the quiet solitude of his study, then at the burner phone in his hand. The room felt cold, but his heart felt warm, knowing that somewhere, just blocks away, his brilliant wife was preparing for their victory. He was alone, yet they were more united than ever. The first 3 months were pure psychological torment, but they were also the foundation of their new, unbreakable alliance. The Lee family believed Junho was broken and compliant. They had no idea he was now a soldier commanded by a ghost, an intelligence asset hidden in plain sight, preparing a final, devastating act of defiance. And with that, the stage is set. 3 months down, 3 to go until the birth of their son. We move into the deeper strategic planning. The air in the Lee mansion grew colder, but in Junho's study, the tension was white hot. 3 months into their separation, the initial shock had worn off, replaced by the rigid discipline of covert warfare. Junho and Aisha's alliance was no longer just about survival. It was about premeditated dismantling. Aisha, now 5 months pregnant, found her strength in fierce concentration. From her anonymous apartment, she began to delve into the heart of the Lee family's political and social leverage. Junho, inside the citadel, was her primary source of data. She realized that his parents' greatest strength, their obsession with lineage and corporate honor, was their greatest weakness. The chairman had built his empire on the image of unwavering, ethical Korean leadership, yet had employed highly questionable foreign tax strategies and obscure intellectual property clauses. "The contract itself is our weapon, Junho, not the breach, but the existence. It proves their manipulation, but we need irrefutable proof of their hypocrisy. Find the offshore accounts related to the 2018 telecom deal." Junho had to access files his father had sealed a decade ago. It required breaking into his father's private digital vault, a treasonous act that would mean instant ruin if discovered. But he was no longer operating as Chairman Lee's son, he was Aisha's partner. Evidence of widespread tax evasion tied to the 2018 telecom deal. The data was damning. It wouldn't just hurt the company, it would expose the chairman to criminal charges. Junho copied the files onto a secure, encrypted drive and sent Aisha a single coded message: "Found the ghost." Meanwhile, Yoonhee, emboldened by the silent approval of Madame Park, was growing bolder and more manipulative. Yoonhee's attempts to bond with Jiun failed miserably. The child's quiet resistance was a constant, silent accusation. One afternoon, Yoonhee tried to force Jiun to accept a traditional Korean dress, claiming it was time the child forgot the foreign ways. Jiun reacted with a heartbreaking tantrum, collapsing into tears and shouting, "Teacher Aisha's song!" Junho stepped in, his voice lethal. Do not force her, Yoonhee. You are not her mother. Yoonhee smiled cruelly. I am her blood, Junho, and soon I will be your wife again. That foreign woman is nothing but a distant rumor. Junho recounted the incident over the burner phone. Aisha's voice was icy. Yoonhee is escalating the emotional damage. We must preempt the custody battle. I have found the legal lever. In South Korean family law, the court heavily favors the child's established emotional welfare and cultural environment, especially when the birth mother has been absent for an extended period. We need documentation of Jiun's distress and her connection to my culture. Aisha prepared a detailed document outlining the psychological stability Jiun had found with her, supported by statements obtained secretly from Aisha's former nursery colleagues. This was her counter-custody claim. She was uniquely necessary for Jiun's stability. The birth. The birth of their son. Junho was scheduled for a stiff, mandatory dinner with his parents to publicly discuss the re-engagement to Yoonhee. It was a suffocating ceremony of duty and lies. The reckoning is here, waiting for the light. Aisha was in labor, alone. Junho sat rigid at the table, listening to his father lecture him on the importance of lineage. The food in his mouth tasted like ash. He maintained his composure with a superhuman effort, nodding, agreeing, playing the role of the devoted heir. Later that night, alone in his study, Junho received the final message from Aisha's friend. A boy. Strong, loud, and full of fire. Your son. Junho sank onto the cold leather chair, his suit rumpled, his face buried in his hands. He was a father again, yet he had missed the birth of his son, a sacrifice made for the safety of his family. The immense joy was mingled with profound, soul-crushing guilt. Name him Jae-won means one who keeps the source, fire. Tell her I will be there soon. The wait is over. The birth of Jae-won was not just a personal event, it was the start of the countdown. The 6-month window was closed. Junho had his legal evidence, the tax files, and his emotional proof, the children. It was time to choose. With Jae-won's birth, Junho's focus became absolute. He filed the paperwork for the final, devastating legal move using the offshore IP flaw Aisha had identified, tying it directly to the 2018 telecom deal and making the chairman's assets vulnerable. He prepared an international private jet route arranged through a shell company in a neutral nation, ensuring their immediate escape would be untraceable. He drafted the final, brutal statement that would sever his ties to the Lee dynasty. The mansion felt like a tinderbox, and Junho was ready to strike the match. The cold facade was about to shatter, releasing the pent-up fire of 6 months of controlled rage. The deadline had passed. Jae-won was 2 weeks old, and Junho could no longer endure the calculated cruelty of the gilded cage. He had secured the damning files, transferred the necessary funds, and, with Aisha's detailed coordination, prepared the legal strike that would shatter the Lee family's foundation. The final act of deception began on a Tuesday. Junho orchestrated a highly publicized but ultimately trivial corporate trip to Singapore. He made a show of saying goodbye to Yoonhee and his parents, assuring them he would return with a successful deal. The charade was perfect. Instead of boarding the private jet to Singapore, Junho slipped away in a prearranged unmarked car. The plan was in motion. The first contained the irrefutable evidence of the chairman's tax evasion and the IP manipulation, paired with a meticulously prepared legal filing drafted by Aisha. This was the preemptive strike, filed electronically and set to auto-publish simultaneously in 3 international jurisdictions. It didn't just expose the chairman, it crippled the company's immediate operational ability. The second was his public statement, a searing declaration of his choice to abandon the dynasty for his true family and his denunciation of the ethical corruption within the Lee Corporation. Not a second sooner, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Mr. Kim. Not a second sooner, Junho instructed, his voice low and devoid of emotion. By the time the chairman wakes, the fire will have started. Junho drove through the silent Seoul streets toward the mansion. He bypassed the main gate and used a staff entrance, moving through the immense house with the stealth of a ghost. The silence was his cover. He reached Jiun's room. The little girl was asleep, curled around her faded toy. Junho knelt by the bed, his armor finally cracking. He gently touched her cheek. "My love," he whispered, "Daddy is here to keep his promise." Jiun stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Seeing her father, not in his cold suit, but in comfortable travel clothes, she smiled, a small, trusting light in the darkness. "Teacher Aisha?" she asked, her voice a tiny thread. "Yes, my brave one, and your little brother, Jaewon," Junho confirmed. Jiun slid out of bed, her excitement overcoming her shyness. Junho bundled her into a soft coat, holding her close, inhaling the scent of his daughter. He was no longer a CEO, he was just a father, stealing his child back from a prison of lineage. Junho drove across the city, the silence of the car filled with the immense significance of his actions. He parked 2 blocks from Aisha's apartment. He walked the rest of the way, Jiun tucked securely in his arms. He knocked on the anonymous metal door. Aisha opened it. She was beautiful, dressed in simple, comfortable clothes, her face tired from lack of sleep, but radiant with fierce resolve. She was holding a small, tightly swaddled bundle, their son, Jaewon. The reunion was not a desperate, passionate kiss. It was the solemn, profound acknowledgement of 2 war-weary generals who had won a battle. Junho stepped into the warm, small apartment. The air was rich with the scent of shea butter, herbal tea, and new baby. It was home. June immediately wiggled free of Junho's grasp, her eyes fixed on the bundle in Aisha's arms. Aisha knelt, one arm studying the baby. "June, my heart," she said softly, tears finally blurring her vision. June didn't hesitate. She put a tiny hand out and gently touched her new brother's cheek. Jaewon stirred, his eyes blinking open. Jiun's face, which had been so cold and masked for 6 months, dissolved into pure, unadulterated joy. Junho watched the scene, the 2 women and the 2 children who were the architects of his freedom. He finally dropped the facade, sinking onto the nearest chair, exhausted but free. "The filings are initiated," he rasped, looking at Aisha. "By sunrise, the dynasty will be in chaos. We have 48 hours. Aisha nodded, her gaze firm. "Then we don't waste a second. Our safe house and travel documents are ready. I prepared the route through a country with no extradition treaty. We run not from the law, but from their influence." Later that evening, after Jiwon and Jaewon were settled, Junho and Aisha stood together by the window of the small, warm apartment. The contrast to the sterile mansion was absolute. "I am sorry I missed the birth," Junho said, pulling Aisha gently into his arms. "You were where you needed to be," Aisha replied, leaning her head against his chest, "fighting for our right to the birth. We did this together, Junho, every step, every risk." He held her tighter. "The contract is utterly destroyed now. The breach, the deception, it's all exposed." "Yes," Aisha murmured, looking out at the endless city lights. "But the contract was the lie. This," she lifted her hand and pressed it against his heart, "this is the truth. The fire was always real. We risked everything, and we won everything." They were no longer the CEO and the teacher, or the husband and the contract wife. They were partners forged in fire and conspiracy, united by love and a shared strategic victory. The next morning, as the news of the Lee Corporation scandal broke like a tidal wave across Seoul, Junho, Aisha, Ji-won, and Jaewon were already on a private jet, flying toward a new life built not on lineage and duty, but on independence and the fierce, unyielding love of a family earned through sacrifice. Freedom. The end. The cost of freedom. A vow sealed not in cold ink, but in shared sacrifice and the undeniable reality of their two beautiful children. Junho and Aisha didn't just escape the Lee dynasty, they dismantled it from the inside. They proved that true power doesn't reside in inherited wealth or ancient lineage, but in unity, love, and strategic defiance. The life they chose, free, independent, and defined by their own rules, was the ultimate victory over the cold, manipulative world they left behind. The fire has consumed the contract, but what price did they truly pay? Junho gave up an empire. Aisha risked her future and her safety. If you were Junho, knowing the cost of exposing your family, would you have still pressed that button? And for Aisha, was the risk of staying in Seoul, pregnant and in the shadows, worth the reward of standing as an equal partner in the fight? Their journey proves that sometimes the most dangerous breach is the truth, and the greatest security is found not in wealth, but in the heart of the right partner. Join the journey. If this epic conclusion left you breathless, hit that subscribe button and tell us where in the world you're celebrating Junho and Aisha's freedom. Thank you for reading. We'll see you for the next story.